Okay, I think we can start. If anyone wants to join, they will join like in 2 or 3 minutes. I'll do the quick first introduction, and then this stage is yours. So yeah, I will do the introduction now. So I'm sorry that I'm here instead of Mehzad. He had an accident, and yes, he wasn't feeling well, so I'm here instead of him. Let me start by introducing you and, of course, welcoming you to this online session. So I will start, and I think the session is being recorded. So I welcome everyone to today's exciting webinar hosted by the Digital Humanities Association of Shiraz University. My name is Armita Hakliti, your host for today, and I'm actually really delighted to have you here, Dr. Alberto Romele, or I don't know if I'm not
It's
pronouncing
perfect. It's perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so thank you. I can pronounce it even better if you want, but okay.
So. No, it's a perfect pronunciation.
Yeah. I guess if the original one is Alberto. Yes. So
exactly. But I live in France, so everybody pronounces it in a strange way.
Okay. So. That's fine. So, and our esteemed speaker. So I welcome you, and this is really great having you here. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you. So it's a bit weird. Yes, you are an associate professor at the Institute of Communication and Media at Sorbonne Nouvelle. Oh my God, I can't pronounce it in English.
That's perfect. The Sorbonne Nouvelle, it's perfect. That's great.
Yeah, so I don't pronounce the French version. Sorry. And his research expertise spans digital humanities. Yes, if I'm not mistaken. Humanities. Sorry, I missed. Sorry, and we are going to present your latest work, I guess. Digital Habitus, a critic of the Imaginaries of artificial intelligence. And the session is going to actually and promises to offer profound insights into how digital environments shape our understanding and engagement with technology and AI. So, and we encourage all of you attendees to actually participate actively during the Q&A segment following your speech. And yes, I guess that's all. And I welcome you again. And yes, the virtual stage is yours. So yeah, I will turn off my microphone and webcam and just listen to you for the rest of the session. I will be back before the session ends. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. It was a perfect introduction. I really like the fact that it was a bit informal, that it was a perfect presentation. With a perfect pronunciation of my name. So thank you very much.
Oh, sorry. I could have pronounced it a lot better, but I'm supposed to.
No, it's perfect. As I said, well, it's a great pleasure to be here and to have the occasion to discuss with you about the idea I've developed in my last book. And just to add maybe one element to my biography is the fact that I have a background in philosophy of technology, and now I work in media studies. So I work in a department of media studies as a media scholar. So I had to bring together two different traditions, and that's why you will see probably in my presentation exactly the fusion or the articulation between these two dimensions, one which is more theoretical. It's more focused on what technologies are, what they do to our existence and so forth and so on. And on the other, some more empirical work on the imaginaries of artificial intelligence. I have some slides to share with you. So let's see. I should be able to do it by myself. Yeah. So I think now you see my slides. And of course, feel free to interrupt me and to ask questions if some passages are not clear, or if you don't want to wait until the end of my presentation to ask the question. I will talk for about 40-45 minutes, and then we'll have time for discussion. So, yes, I'm going to talk about my last book that was published at the end of 2023, beginning 2024, about digital habitus, but I will show also how this book is related to my previous work in the field of digital hermeneutics. So let's start. Yeah, my well, let's say that I started this long project. Digital Habitus might be considered as the second volume of my research into the field of digital hermeneutics. And when I started to work in this field, trying to bring together classical philosophical hermeneutics with the issue of digital technologies, well, when I started to work on that, I started to distinguish between different meanings of this term, digital hermeneutics, in the attempt of systematize a little bit a field which is not a field, but it's also true that many people started in the past year to use this expression digital hermeneutics to indicate very different things. So in my first book, Digital Hermeneutics, which was published in 2019, I distinguished mainly between three meanings of this expression, digital hermeneutics. Well, the first one was the constructive meaning. What does it mean? It means that digital technologies can be used to criticize traditional hermeneutics and in general all the philosophies of language for their what I called idealism of matter. What does it mean? It means that there was a sort of neglection, lack of attention towards the materiality of the media and towards the materiality that are used in order to transmit the meaning from one point to the other point. Philosophy of languages are interested into meaning, but they are not interested in the material support of transmission of this meaning. So I started to use digital technologies to criticize this aspect of the philosophies of technologies that had an important role, especially in Europe, especially in the second half of the 20th century. Then there was another meaning of digital hermeneutics, which was an epistemological meaning, in which I primarily questioned, I would say, two aspects. The first one was the nature of data, digital data. Why is that? Because when we mobilize this notion of data, we have the impression to deal with something which is immediate, which is natural, which is almost self-evident, because the etymology of the word data suggests something that is self-evident, something that is immediate and natural. But in reality, data are rather what I called capta. What does it mean, capta? Something that is captured, something that is taken, something that is captured through specific technologies for collecting data and then to work on this data. And so data are not something natural, but are rather the result of human decisions and contingencies in terms of methods we use, technologies we use, technique we use, and of course our competencies, for instance, as digital humanists. For this reason, I also engage with another notion, which is the notion of digital trace. What is a trace? In the phenomenological tradition of philosophers like Jacques Derrida and Emmanuel Levinas, trace is the presence of the absence. And in the notion of trace that can be used in order to define digital traces, in the notion of trace, there is a sort of implicit fragility, because we have something that appears but doesn't correspond to the things which is absent, which is not there anymore. And I also refer to an Italian historian, Carlo Ginzburg, who developed this notion of evidential paradigm. Evidential paradigm as a paradigm of epistemology in human and social sciences, where we build a sort of knowledge based on traces, which is a sort of fragile and a certain way of building knowledge. Well, my idea was that even when we do digital humanities, even when we do computational sociology, in reality, we are building not a form of certainty, epistemological certainty, but a sort of epistemological fragility. Which doesn't mean, of course, that is not a valid source of knowledge. But we have to realize that this knowledge is always fragile, so it can be discussed, it can be criticized, and so forth and so on. Well, there was another aspect, but in this epistemological meaning of digital hermeneutics, which is about the notion of information, but I'm not going to discuss here in this context. I would rather focus on this third meaning of the term digital hermeneutics, or of this expression digital hermeneutics, which is the ontological meaning. What does it mean? It means that in this sense, digital hermeneutics deals with the effects of digital machines on the interpretative and imaginative capacities and practices of human beings. So the question was how digital technologies influence our interpretations of the world, or of text, or of cultural production in general. And there was another question related to this ontological meaning, which was whether some of these machines, especially AI machines, might possess what I call the proto-interpretative and proto-imaginative capacities. So the question was, are these machines capable of interpretation, a sort of not completely human, but proto-human interpretation or proto-human imagination? And it's precisely in this context that I've started to conceive or mobilize the notion of habitus. Well, why? Because in fact, to answer my question, are this machine capable of imagination? I had to ask myself another question, but what is human imagination? And the question was, can we say that human imagination is just pure genius, pure creativity, like asserted by Kant, for instance, in the critique of judgment in the paragraph 64? But my personal answer to this question was no. Imagination, even human imagination, is rather an activity of bricolage, of bringing together elements that are already there, and it's never a pure and original creation ex nihilo. Human beings are creatures of habit, and in that sense, since human beings are creatures of habits, then we are not that different from machines, from some kind of machines. So at the end of this journey, I realized that there were other dimensions of digital hermeneutics that remain unexplored, and I wanted to explore them. In particular, I began to focus on two dimensions which are at the center of my book about the digital habitus. The first one is digital hermeneutics in the sense of the hermeneutics of the subject. So the question was, what happens to human processes of subjectivation when they are mediated continuously by digital and algorithmic technologies? And the second meaning was digital hermeneutics in the sense of cultural hermeneutics. And the question was, how do digital technologies create a certain worldview, a certain world image of a certain expectation? And conversely, how does this worldview shape a particular relationship with digital and algorithmic technologies, AIs in particular? So these two questions are at the core of my book about the digital habitus. This is the book. And indeed, the concept of habitus precisely helped me to develop this two dimension of digital hermeneutics. But there was another factor that uh, brought me towards this notion. The fact that in my research, I wanted to criticize a sort of attitude in the contemporary philosophy of technologies, which is characterized by an empirical turn. What is the empirical turn in the philosophy of technology? Is a critique of the earlier pessimistic and deterministic philosophy, which used to focus on the most general aspect of technologies, like Heidegger, who used to say, well, the essence of technologies is nothing technological. The essence of technologies is Gestell, a term that can be translated with dispositive. But, well, the defenders of the empirical turn just started to plea for a more concrete attitude, a more empirical kind of attitude. We should deal, they say we should deal with what engineers do, with what really concrete technologies are. Well, in my view, and that's my point, well, this turn has been overstated as it ended up neglecting an important dimension of technologies, which is the symbolic framework, the atmosphere of meaning, within which all technologies and our relationship with them are always situated. So I didn't want to, let's say, neglect the empirical turn, but I wanted just to say, well, we should also consider this symbolic dimension. And the concept of habitus helped me in this sense. In this context, my presentation is going to be structured in three sections. The first one is about the imaginaries or socio-technical imaginaries and habitus. The second one is dedicated to the digital hermeneutics of the self. And the third one is dedicated to cultural digital hermeneutics. So let's start with the first session about imaginaries and habitus. Well, the problem with the notion of imaginaries or social imaginaries is that is a vague notion. Imaginaries means everything and means nothing at the same time. But there have been several attempts in the history of philosophy and sociology to systematize this concept. For instance, in his lectures on ideology and utopia, the French philosopher Paul Ricoeur developed one rigorous theory of the social imaginary. Well, for Ricoeur, social imaginary is constituted by two poles, the pole of ideology and the pole of utopia. Ideology and utopia should not be defined in opposition to reality, but in relation to it. So it's not an alternative to reality, but it's something that, let's say, give movement, give force to the reality itself. In fact, our access to social reality is always symbolically mediated. Another interesting aspect in Ricoeur's perspective is that not only ideology and utopia and social imagery in general are not an alternative to reality, but they contributed to the creation of our most concrete reality. The other interesting aspect is that ideology and utopia should be understood as the two poles of this symbolically mediated relationship that human beings maintain with social reality, but also they are not negative or positive per se. We should not bring, for instance, ideology on the side of the negative effect of this symbolic dimension and utopia on the positive side. Ideologies function to preserve social order, while utopia represents an attempt to break away from it. But there are negative effects of the ideology when, for instance, it forgets that there is also the other pole, the utopia, so the fact that, we have a sort of symbolic understanding of our reality, but this understanding is not fixed. It moves over time, and there is a negative aspect of utopia when utopia becomes a simple detachment from reality. this notion, this idea according to which the social imaginaries moved between these two poles of ideology and utopia has been applied to technological innovation. For instance, by sociologists, the French sociologist Patrice Flichy in this book, The Internet Imaginaire, which was published in English in 2010 or 2011. Well, in this book, Patrice Flichy examines the collective vision that shaped the emergence of the internet, highlighting how the social imaginary, defined as the polarity between ideology and utopia, influenced the development of this technology. Again, the important thing here is to realize that imaginary is not an alternative, but it's something that allowed, made possible the development, the concrete and material development of this technology. He argues, for instance, that ideology sustains the existing social order, like Ricoeur, while utopia seeks to transform it, and that this dynamic was fundamental in shaping how society conceived and adopted the internet. This is one of the schemes he proposed in his book, showing that, well, in technological innovation, we start with the utopia of some innovators, and we end up with the idea that the solution, the technological solution that has been implemented, is the only solution possible. But it's not a closed circle, but there is a movement that goes back from ideology of utopia when other groups, other social groups, invent or imagine other kind of technological innovation, and hence some kind of alternatives to the dominant technological order. Well, how all this is related to the concept of habitus? Well, the concept of habitus, which can be found, for instance, in the sociology of Pierre Bourdieu, signals to me an imaginary that is oriented toward ideology, more ideology than utopia, more imposed than shared, not really institutionalized, at least not directly, but rather embodied in social dynamics. In my research, I focused on Bourdieu's notion of habitus. For Bourdieu, habitus is what leads individuals from the same social class to behave in a similar way in a given situation, to have the same aspirations and desires toward an object, even when there is no communication, no direct connection between these individuals. It is a social imaginary that guides individuals belonging to the same class in the same direction, both in space and time, as habitus is reproduced from generation to generation. In my own research, I introduced the concept of technological habitus to denote that behaviors, those behaviors that lead us beyond the materiality of the object, because beyond the design of the object, and beyond all the norms that impose us certain behaviors towards this object, but beyond us, there is a technological habitus that bring us to use technologies in a specific way. In my research, in my book, I made this example of the Parisian metro, in which one can move freely from the left bank to the west bank, to the right bank of the city. But in reality, in human practices, in the practices of the citizens of Paris, nobody goes from the left bank to the right bank and vice versa. So there is a sort of behavior that is not just embodied in technology and is not imposed by the norm, but it's just a habit. We don't go, if we live on the left, we don't go to the right. And if we live in the right bank, we don't go to the left, because there are social dynamics in the two parts of the city that are completely different. Okay, but there are several other examples, like the uses of the internet. There has been many studies on how different social classes use the internet in a different way. And of course, this is true also from a cultural perspective. If we take not just digital technologies, but the use of technologies like cell phones and smartphones in every culture, in every country, there are different use that doesn't depend on the materiality of the object or on the norms that impose some uses and do not allows us other uses, do not allow us other uses of the same technologies. So let's go to the second part of my presentation, which is about digital hermeneutics as a hermeneutics of the self, as a hermeneutics of the subject, which is, I would say, the central part of my book about the digital habitus. Well, my really basic idea is that contemporary digital technologies are habitus machines, machines that create and foster and analyze forms of habitus. So, what does it mean? It means that from a technical perspective, a purely technical perspective, it means that today we interact with algorithmic machines that classify human beings according to their most general tendencies in terms of information consumption, preference for cultural products like music, books, and so on. And so forth and so on until we could say also love. I mean, if we use an application to date someone, human beings are classified according to general tendencies, according to which we are similar to other persons that we don't know directly, but we have the same kind of behaviors, we have the same kind of attitude, we have the same kind of aspiration, desires. But yeah, that's exactly the Bourdieusian habitus. So these machines are not interested in what we are as singular persons, but they are more interested into the tendencies, the general tendencies, social tendencies that we represent. So what happens from an existential or subjectivation perspective? It means that the repeated interaction with these technologies, because the interaction with these technologies is continuous. We are always dealing with technologies like that, algorithmic technologies through our smartphones, through our smartwatches, through our laptops. It means that the continuous and repeated interaction with these technologies has a sort of leveling or flattening effect on the self, because it reduces the self, ourselves, to its most generic and habitual aspects. Uh, well, regarding the technical aspect, I have emphasized, for instance, that today our online actions and interactions have no intrinsic value for these platforms. They're not interested into our action and interaction, the people we get in touch with, the kind of contents we watch to or we consume in some way. But it's not that has an intrinsic value. Or rather, they only gain value, this action interaction, to the extent that they produce data that can be collected, sold, processed, and returned to us in the form of advertising, personalized content, and so forth and so on. So they are not interested into the content or in the quality of the interaction, but in the way this interaction produce data that can be analyzed and can be used for creating advertising and so forth and so on. So what happens is that today the digital world is no longer Latourian, where I refer here to Bruno Latour and his idea of social reality as a flatland structure, like a network of human and human actors. But rather, the digital world is Bourdieusian, who imagines why Bourdieu imagines social reality as a three-dimensional space where two or more individuals related to the other only through the habitus they embody and they share with each other, even if they don't know each other. Furthermore, this is also true from a purely technical perspective. If we take a multiple correspondence analysis, for instance, the technique used by Bourdieu in his empirical research, well, it bears a striking similarity to certain contemporary clustering technique in machine learning algorithms. In conclusion, I have stated that we need when we analyze digital platforms, digital technologies in general, a sort of anti-phenomenological attitude towards these technologies. In order to scratch and go beyond the surface of the content of the interaction, in order to see that behind all this, the only things that count are data. Moreover, I have stated that there is a lot of personalization in online services today in terms of access of information, access to cultural contents, and so forth and so on. But there is no personality. Where by personality, I mean the style through which someone appropriates the social habitus. It means that, yes, probably it's true that we are animals that are animals of creature of habits on the one hand, but it's also true that each of us has the capacity of personalize somehow the habitus that he or she receives from the society. And well, this technology just don't care about this personality, this personalization of the habitus. So it's personalization without personality. Well, what happens from an existential perspective? Well, in this sense, in my research, I try to reconsider to interpret the distinction made again by philosopher Paul Ricoeur between two aspects of our identity, ipse and idem. The former, ipse, is dynamic and personalized, while the latter is static and social. So according to Ricoeur, our identity is the articulation between these two extremes, an extreme which is dynamic and really personal, and the other which is more static and is social. Well, I argued in my research that the use of digital technologies leads us to privilege the latter, the more static and social aspect of our personal identities, as it is this aspect that algorithms are capable and want to capture and capitalize on. So, at its core, the digital hermeneutics of the self is hence a sort of anti hermeneutics, in that it deprives subject of authentic possibilities of subjectivation, because we are deprived of the possibility to develop these more personal and dynamic part of our own identities. Well, so let's now enter the third and last part of my presentation about cultural digital hermeneutics, which is also the part that I'm developing right now in my research. My current research indeed represents an extension of the final section of my book, and it's developed through a series of empirical studies. So I'm trying to bring together these theoretical reflections with some empirical studies, some of which I'm conducting alone, some of which I'm conducting in collaboration with other researchers. Specifically, I'm interested right now in media and cultural crystallizations of imaginaries surrounding artificial intelligence. So the way we found in cultural productions and media production sort of representations of artificial intelligence, and the way these representations embed some expectations, some social imaginaries, some fears, some hopes about artificial intelligence. Well, in this context, I started to introduce in my latest research the concept of sociotechnical narratives. So here I propose a definition of sociotechnical narratives, according to which sociotechnical narratives are not limited to science fiction. We are not just talking about science fiction, which is a well-defined literary or cinematic genre. But sociotechnical narratives encompass all kinds of text or image, whether complete or fragmented, that crystallize a sociotechnical vision. These narratives are distributed across movies, literature, literature, official documents, newspapers, articles, and scientific works. And these narratives can serve ideological purposes, so they can serve to maintain the status quo, or utopian purposes, subverting this status quo. Well, what are the main advantages of my definition of socio-technical narratives or micro-narratives? I'm still hesitating about this term, either narratives or micro-narratives. I like micro-narratives because I think these narratives are often very small and fragmented. But the main advantages are three. First of all, there is a sort of alignment with a broader definition of science communication. For instance, in the Handbook of Public Communication of Science and Technologies, it said that science communication is not just a matter for professionals, so researchers or professional in science communication, but science communication is all kind of discourse that is created within a society about a specific science technologies like artificial intelligence. So this discourse can be visual, but can be also textual, it can be artistic, it can be scientific, it can be popular. In this sense, for instance, even comments on that are made on social networks like YouTube about artificial intelligence are part of science communication. Okay, so and in some way they contribute to the production or the discussion about the imaginaries, about our expectation towards artificial intelligence. The second advantage is that this notion, this definition, of socio-technical narratives is more dynamic and fragmented. Is dynamic and fragmented, and it gives us the possibility to understand, in general, socio-technical imageries not as something which is well defined, for instance, by a state, a public institution, or by a scientific order, but is dynamic and fragmented in the sense that it can be produced here and there. It can be produced by small communities, it can be produced by individuals, it can be produced, of course, by institutions, but it can be also produced by formal and non-formal social organizations and social groups. And the third advantage of this definition is that it proposes a sort of agonistic perspective. I don't have the time to explain what agonism is, but the idea of agonism is borrowed from a French philosopher and sociologist. Her name is Chantal Mouffe, who speaks about agonism as a possibility for democratic societies. But in this sense, I think that my definition of socio-technical narratives introduces an agonistic lens, suggesting that narrative can be both ideological and utopia, both institutionalized and institutionalizing. It means that they can be there to maintain the status quo or to fight against the status quo. So, socio-technical narratives can be understood as as places of hegemonic struggle. Following Antonio Gramsci, Marxist philosopher Antonio Gramsci's notion of competing forces vying for cultural and ideological dominance. So the idea is that in these narratives, through these narratives, we can observe that there are several fights, agonistic fights, not at a material but at a symbolic level, in order to have a sort of hegemony in the not only in our representation of artificial intelligence, but also in our understanding of artificial intelligence. And this hegemony has concrete effects into the processes of innovation and implementation of artificial intelligence in our societies. So my thesis is that socio-technical narratives of AI are an integral part of AI itself. They are not detached. So I think this is my central thesis. When we speak about narratives about AI, we tend to think that they are mere accidents, that they are just cosmetic, that they are something that is added upon a socio-technical innovation process that is completely independent of these narratives and of the imaginaries that they represent or they embed. But the reality is that these narratives, along with the imaginaries they crystallize, are not just cosmetic, because society and therefore the socio-technical domain requires a symbolic dimension in order to exist. Within this symbolic system, we encounter both institute and institutionalizing forces, both forces that are there in order to maintain the status quo and forces that are there to transform it. Well, I go in the very last part of my presentation to describe, to present one case study, the one about stock images representing AI and their effects on our understanding of AI and hence on our practices of implementation of AI in our societies. I focus on this case study because it's probably the case study I developed more in the past 2 years. So when I speak about stock images representing AI, I refer to this kind of images. So the images you find when you just type the words artificial and intelligence on a browser, on Google, or another kind of search engine. So stock images are images that you can buy online on the websites of agencies, stock agencies like Getty Images or Shutterstock. By the way, last week Getty Images and Shutterstock merged. So they're going to be a unique company, which creates a huge leviathan of the production of these images, which is often neglected. But this is not the question here. The question here, well, these images are not just available on the internet, but they are widely used in a context of science communication about artificial intelligence. For instance, you find them on several covers of books dedicated to artificial intelligence. You find them on posters announcing conferences. You find them on websites describing academic, very serious programs about artificial intelligence. But these images are problematic. They have several kind of issues. Here, this is a collection of 10,000 images representing AI that has been scraped from the website of Shutterstock. Well, here, for instance, the interesting aspect of this research I conducted with a colleague is the fact that you see two dominant colors, the color white and the color blue. There are some publications about the color white. There is a well-known publication titled The Whiteness of AI. With my colleague, we focus rather on the blue. Why on the blue? Because historically, the blue has a sort of tranquilizing and anesthetizing effect on the viewer, on the spectator. And we started to reflect about the fact that the abundant use of blue in the representation of AI is not innocent, but it has the effect of anesthetizing the public and creating a sort of trust towards AI. So our idea was that the use of this blue is not innocent, but create this anesthetizing kind of effect. It's not by chance that, for instance, many European institutions are blue. That, for instance, in Italy, police is blue, that Meta is blue, or other big companies, because the blue has this effect of anesthetizing, tranquilizing. But the problem is that it also impede, in some ways, a sort of authentic debate among citizens about the current status of artificial intelligence and its implementation into the society. I will come back to this aspect later. Here, I want to focus on some ideas I have developed about this representation of AI. So the first one is that the problem with these images is not just aesthetic, but also ontological and political. Of course, these images have an aesthetic kind of problem. The fact that they are generally very ugly from an aesthetic perspective. But they have, I would say, more serious kind of issues. There are more serious kind of issues related to these images. The first one is the ontological aspect. I think these images, like the images I showed you before, like this one, tell us something about the difficulty or maybe the impossibility to represent visually today what AI really is. What is AI today? Today, AI is algorithms. Okay, so how can we represent visually AI? Of course, we can represent the algorithm, but well, there are several issues. What does it mean to represent visually an algorithm? Should we just yes? I've seen that someone raise a hand, or maybe it was just a mistake. Okay. Uh, I was saying the first problem is that, well, what does it mean we could, for instance, represent visually the algorithm, but how can we say that algorithm is the artificial intelligence? First of all, we cannot represent an entire algorithm because we are talking today about thousands of lines of code. And of course, for most of the people, these lines of code are not understandable. And of course, even if we represent visually the entirety of an algorithm, there is a huge difference between the algorithm and the artificial intelligence. It would be like to say that a picture of the brain is a good representation of human intelligence, but they are two very different things. So another option, of course, would be to represent not the artificial intelligence, but the technology in which artificial intelligence is supposed to be embedded, like a drone, like a robot, like I don't know, whatever. But of course, we can never be sure that behind that machine, that visible machine, there is in reality an algorithm. That machine can be just an empty box without nothing inside, without anything inside. And the third way of representing visually artificial intelligence is this one. But of course, in this way, we are completely detached from the reality of artificial intelligence. There are no brains like these ones. There are no robots like these ones. There are no lights, zero and ones. There are no flashes. Nothing corresponds to the reality of AI here. The second the third one issue, so the first issue is aesthetic, the second is ontological. The third kind of issue that is raised by this kind of image is political and social in order. As I said, if we take the dominant visuals of artificial intelligence, we see, for instance, the massive use of blue as color. And this color, I said, have anesthetizing effects on the broader debate about AI. And I think this is the problem with all these images. They don't create the debate. They just they are just numbing the possibility of critical discourse about AI, and they are somehow fostering complacency. And they are also creating a gap, a division, a cruel and really strict division between expert and non-expert. Those who are inside and those who are outside, those who can understand and those who cannot not understand. We can see thousands, and indeed we see thousands of these kind of images, and in the end we don't understand anything about artificial intelligence. But we develop a sort of trustworthiness towards those who develop these kind of technologies. Well, what is the solution? I don't think the solution. I don't think the solution is go back to more honest images. For instance, to create images that represent the artificial intelligence as it is, because as I said, it's impossible. The thing is that what we started to develop, myself and together with some colleagues, is this notion of agonistic images. Images that are able to promote not forms of anesthetization, but form of agonism and public debate about this science and technologies, which is artificial intelligence. Agonistic images are representation that invite critical reflection and foster a sort of deeper engagement with the complexities of AI. Well, these are three publications about this topic I've published in the past few years. This paper appeared in Philosophy of Technologies, Images of Artificial Intelligence, a Blind Spot in AI Ethics, which is more oriented towards philosophy of technology. This one is more oriented towards media studies. In this paper, there are two interesting aspects. The first one is that we run some interview with producers of stock images of AI on the one hand, and on the other hand, we started to ask ourselves what is happening now where artificial intelligence is capable, generative AI is capable of producing images of itself, representation of itself. It's not anymore the case that human beings produce images of artificial intelligence, but artificial intelligence produces representation of itself. And in this way, AI is creating its own conditions of possibility, is its own symbolic conditions of possibilities. It's somehow creating the symbolic atmosphere that has a fundamental role in determining our expectation towards AI. So it's quite paradoxical, but human beings historically has been capable of creating this symbolic atmosphere through media and cultural productions, and today we have AI that created these productions, and these productions have a huge impact on our expectations. And well, this is the third publication I wanted to mention, which is more thought for the public at large, in which we reflect indeed on this broad use of the blue color and its anesthetizing effect. And this small short publication was published on the website of these initiatives, which is the Better Images of AI blog initiative. But I would like to conclude with another kind of images, because the question is, what are these agonistic images? I have no idea. I mean, I have some ideas about artistic images and blah, 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 but I'm not completely satisfied. So with a colleague, we started to work on the memes, online memes that represent or that make humor about artificial intelligence. And we started to reflect about the fact that if we create memes about artificial intelligence, it's because we are fundamentally scared about our future relation with AI, and in particular with generative AI. And indeed, memes create a sort of intimacy, collective intimacy, sorry, and they help us into exercise, let's say, our fears about AI. And maybe, but that's just a maybe, they help us also in creating form of public discussion about artificial intelligence. So in our research, we are now writing the paper. We're starting to collect a lot of memes. We collected more than 2,000 memes about artificial intelligence, about generative AI, and we started to propose of a sort of systematization of these memes. Here I presented just 4 categories. So first one is the apocalyptic category. This is one example for the apocalyptic category of our undesirable future with AI. Here you have another kind of category, which is the category in which we make irony about our present expectations towards AI. Then there is another category, which is about educational AI, the relation between education and AI. And we could also add in this category the relation between AI and human labor and the future of human work. And the last one is about anti-capitalistic memes against or about AI. So again, in conclusion, I was wondering, we are wondering why now, why why do we currently create so many memes about artificial intelligence? And the answer for us is that we create them in order to exercise our fears towards our future relationship with generative AI, because we don't know what is going to happen. The question that remains, in our view, open is that if this kind of visual production have also the effect of creating a public debate about artificial intelligence, or if they will bring us to accept in a sort of a fatalistic way our the present situation, the present status quo. So the question is that, are they capable to create forms of discussion, public discussion about artificial intelligence and generative AI in particular, or are just they will bring us just to accept the status quo? So I think that is also my conclusion. And if you are interested in the presentation, I can share it with you. You can send me an email, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Do you have my voice?
Yes, yes, of course.
Okay, that's great. Let me just turn on my webcam. I hope that you can see me because of the light. Hi. Okay.
Hi.
Hi. So thank you very much. It was great. So I want to ask our dear attendees if you have any questions that you want to ask.
Yeah, in the meanwhile, I can also share through a link my presentation here. Mm-hmm. So it's more or less everything what I said. Wait, I'm just doing that. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So no questions, right? Not for now. Everything was a bit clear, and it didn't make me kind of want to ask any questions, but thank you very much. It was awesome, and it was quite thought-provoking. Mehrzad has said it was thought-provoking. Yeah, Professor Romele. How do you pronounce your last name? Sorry.
It's perfect. Romele. Actually, everybody goes, it's interesting because in Italy, everybody pronounces it in the wrong way, like Romele. I don't know why, but it's Romele, so it's perfect. And here in France, it's either Romel or Romele. It depends. But it's a perfect pronunciation.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. I'm glad. So I guess one of our attendees, dear Moradian, has a question. Dear Mr. Moradian.
Yes, right.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much. Nice to be in this meeting. And I really appreciate Dr. Alberto's
Thank you.
presence in this meeting. It was all informative and scholarly. I understood almost whatever you said, but thank you again for this. I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
From a philosophical perspective, as you mentioned as well in the presentation, I would like to know more about this issue, IA, and its realization in this modern world from an ethical perspective. Like what Heidegger says in Ethics of Care, or Hannah Arendt talks about it in terms of ethics of care. It seems that technology is that sort of human existence in today's world, but I mean, it should not hamper our authenticity. What's your perspective about this? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would like to say, well, there are many things I would like to say about, in order to reply to your question. But maybe there is one point. So I totally agree with that. Although I'm often quite critical towards Heidegger perspective because it's too monolithic, because he understands everything as Gestalt, while technology is more complicated than that. I totally agree with him about the fact that, there is
Yes.
in technology, there is a tendency to realize itself. So technology is something that they develop, at least in our society, we have the impression that we cannot stop the development of technology. We have the impression that there is no alternative. We cannot just, also because, and here I talk like a European, we always say, well, if it's not us, it's going to be China. If it's not us, it's going to be the United States. So we have to develop artificial intelligence because nobody can stop it. And that's true for all kinds of technology. So my idea is that we should, my idea is that, first of all, this idea is an idea. So it's not something that is embedded into the technology, in the materiality of technology. It's something that is rather embedded in our symbolic understanding of technology. We think that technological development cannot be either stopped or deviated or cannot be thought otherwise, but it's more symbolic than concrete. I think that if we change our mind from the symbolic perspective, we can figure out other ways of developing technologies, or even the decision of not developing or not implementing this kind of technologies in specific kind of environment, in specific kind of context. So this is my first idea. The second idea is that in order to provoke this changement of understanding of symbolic dimension towards technology, we have to provoke forms of public debate about artificial intelligence. We have to provoke, and we have to be capable to hear to alternative voices. Those voices who say, no, I don't want to use artificial intelligence in this context, but can also not about artificial intelligence, but more simple things like, I don't know how it's in Iran, but I can tell you that in France, it's not possible today to have a bank account if you don't have a smartphone and if you don't have an application on your smartphone. Okay. But, there might be forms of resistance, and we should be sensible to these alternative voices that say, no, I don't want to have a smartphone in order to have a bank account. I have the right as a citizen, as a French citizen, to have a bank account, even if I don't have a cell phone. So my idea is that it's a symbolic thing, and we should foster forms of critical debate about this symbolic dimension. And this critical debate could provoke different form of understanding and hence different form of implementation. Just to give you an example, today AI is widely used in France for many sensible situations like unemployment. When you are unemployed, you can receive money from the state, but there is an evaluation system. And this evaluation system is automatically decided through an algorithm. Okay, should we use algorithms in this sensible domain? Or again, algorithms are used for deciding the list of organ transplant in France, like heart transplant are decided through an algorithm. But in such a sensible domain, should we really use, I'm not saying that artificial intelligence is not useful, of course, but I'm saying, well, a public debate about these specific kind of applications. Okay, I don't know if I answered to your question.
Yes. Thank you very much for the answer.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. There's actually a question in the chat box. It's Negin said it was quite mind-blowing, and since AI gets stigmatized with blue, the color, can we consider a future where AI and blue are no longer intertwined, or at least less stigmatized?
Yeah, that's interesting. Of course, there are two levels that I in order to reply to this question. The first level is prescriptive, is a hope, and yes, of course, I hope there will be in the future more complicated visuals about artificial intelligence. So I hope that in science communication, and not just in science communication, as a scientist, we will plea for more complicated, more, let's say, careful representation of artificial intelligence, more honest, but not in the sense honest in the sense that they have to represent artificial intelligence as it is, but for instance, they have to honestly represent our daily interaction with systems that embed AI technologies. But that's a hope. The present situation, so on the descriptive side, I would give a more darker kind of reply. Why is that? Because today, as I said, we are using more and more generative AI in order to produce images of artificial intelligence. And this generative AI has been trained with stock images of AI. So if you try to produce an image of artificial intelligence with a tool like DALL-E or Stable Diffusion or whatever, most probably, if you don't prompt the tool in the right way, you will have images that are very similar to the blue images that dominate the visuals today. So I'm much less optimistic in this sense because we can presume that in the future we will use massively AI to produce representations of AI.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. So thank you very much for the answer. And she said, interesting. Merci beaucoup. Yes. So thank you very much, Dr. Romeller, for being here. And thank you very much for your presentation. And I guess you can share your the QR code and also the link one more time so our dear attendees can have it. And then I will end the session.
Yeah, you have it here. I can share it again. Just wait, I just put in the last, so you have the last message.
Okay, sure.
A message in which I shared the presentation. And I just wanted to thank you for the invitation. It was really nice to present my ideas and to have this little discussion of you with you. And I really hope that in the future there will be other occasion of discussing about this and other things. And
I really
me know
hope
what you are doing. I mean, the next time probably we'll discuss about your research in the field.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was great having you here. And I hope that we can have you for more sessions. Yes, it was an honor to present your presentation, to start your presentation. Yes. So thank you very much. Thank you for today. And everyone, thank you for coming here. And yes, that's it. That's all. So
yeah,
I guess
thank you again to you and to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. No problem. Yes. So have a great day. Bye-bye, everyone.
Yeah, you too.
Thank
Bye.
you, Nagin. Thank you, Nagin.
You're welcome. Ciao.
You're welcome. Yes. Okay. Bye.